So we're here tonight at Mansplain Baseball Elsewhere with Meredith Wills, and we're going to let her tell y'all a little bit about herself.
Okay, I'm Meredith Wills. I am, I guess most people would know me for working on baseball construction over the last couple of years. In real life, I have a PhD in astrophysics. I actually do data science research looking at ball and player tracking data, which is kind of cool. But I've, in my copious spare time, have been looking at baseballs and particularly how the manufacturing has changed such that we got the 2017 home run surge, the 2019 home run surge, and then also the changes, I guess, more in the actual population of the balls for explaining the postseason and why the ball suddenly died. And so that's pretty much what people would know about me.
So Meredith, I wanted to see you've written a few articles for The Athletic, and it mentioned in one of them that you do knitting you make reproductions of baseball sweaters for the Baseball Hall of Fame and the Negro League Museum.
Yes, I do. That's that can also go into the bio. Yeah, I am also in, again, more spare time, I do knitting design. And one of the things that I guess sort of how some of this got started was about, I guess it was 2007. I won a contest with a fan organization called Stitch and Pitch. It was a national contest. It was a pair of socks that I designed. And you can put like any one of maybe 25 logos for teams, depending on who you're a fan of. Cool. And in 2009, the Hall of Fame contacted me and said, do you want to have these socks? Can we have these socks for our Hall of Fame? And I said, great, yeah, absolutely. And so they've been on display there since 2010. And that sort of started a partnership with the Hall of Fame that's extended also to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And a couple things. One has been looking at the actual stitch-by-stitch reproductions. I've done one reproduction already, which is a pair of stirrup socks to go with Eddie Goodell's uniform for a display a few years ago. And now I'm looking at stitch-by-stitch reproductions of sweaters that they have in their collection. So I'm almost done with one that Ty Cobb donated himself, and then should move on to others. And then similarly with the Negro Leagues Museum, I have I'm working on a reproduction of a sweater from the first Negro Leagues World Series in I think 1924. So it's kind of cool because it's history and it's reverse engineering and it's a lot of fun stuff like that. And knitting, obviously.
So you're not just looking at like how the pattern on the sweater, you're actually looking at how it was stitched together and everything like that.
Oh, yes. It turns out a lot of the construction techniques, it looks like it was probably World War II where the transition might have happened, because you see a lot of similar construction techniques from, 1900 pretty much, or, not much later, through at least the late 1930s. And after that, I'm discovering things that, even though I've been knitting my entire life, I've never seen patterns with these before. And it took a bunch of false starts with the Ty Cobb sweater. The version that is now. Sorry, I was getting an echo. Let's try that again. So the version that I'm working on now is actually the fourth try, which is partly why it's taken so long. Because, to get it right, you gotta get it right, which means you take it apart and you do it again.
Wow.
But yeah, it's been really, really cool because I'm learning a lot about how stuff would have been done back then, and things that just it doesn't look like people really documented.
Yeah.
So who knows? Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I guess I'm just wondering, were they machine-made sweaters that you're doing by hand, or
no? If I can go on about the sweater stuff if you want. I wasn't quite sure what some of the topics were going to be, but
we kind of go all over the place. I'm sorry.
No, I'm good with it. I'm good with it. No, actually, in fact, machine made is one of the things they were not. And that's one of the things that people fail to realize a lot, because right now so many of our clothes are machine made. Sweaters back then, there were factories, but the factories were literally human beings who knit the sweaters. And that's part of the reason I think that some of these techniques have been lost, is because they are hand knit yet also mass produced.
Right.
And not even necessarily like machine knitting. There are certain techniques on these sweaters, things like the shoulder joints, the way the sleeves are joined to the arms, or excuse me, the arms are joined to the body, that you can only do if you're hand knitting. There's also things that seem to show up related to different parts of the sweater that make it look like a kind of assembly line. Like, for instance, the way the cuff attaches to the sleeve makes it look like the cuff was made by one person using one size needles, and the sleeve was made by another person using another size needles, and then someone joined them together. Because there's like one row that doesn't quite match, and otherwise it looks like it has two front ends and no cast off end, which is kind of odd. So, I mean, again, this is really geeking out on some of this stuff, or realizing that there's a switch over. If you look at the history, you see a lot more pullovers closer to the turn of the last century, I guess. And you don't really start to see much in the way of cardigans until like the 19-teens. And then by the time you're into the 20s and stuff, it's all cardigans. Circular needles were actually not really in use, as far as I can tell, until probably around 1910 or later. And you can't actually knit a pullover on, you can't knit a cardigan on the kind of needles they would have used. You need something like a circular needle to knit these cardigans, because it's like one piece that's like 50 inches across or 45 inches across. And so there's a totally different technique that you would have to have used, because circular needles didn't exist, which meant you got pullovers, and cardigans were very hard to make. So again, totally geeking out. But yeah, so that's what I do for fun. In fact, I'm literally taking apart a baseball as we're talking. So it seemed like a good time, But,
yep. So it seems like that, and I mean, obviously it's different materials or whatever, but like that and the baseball deconstruction, reconstruction, all that, kind of two different sides of the same coin, or like you just seem to like taking things apart and putting them back together and figuring out better ways or whatever.
Well, the baseball construction research started as again, it actually sort of fell out of another project I've been working on with the Hall of Fame, which is the inside of a baseball is mostly yarn. And, was interested in seeing the quality. And it turns out that the yarn inside professional baseballs, this is, minor league and major league, which, by the way, are different on the inside. They're made in different places. Major league balls are made in Costa Rica. Minor league balls are made in China. And the yarn is slightly different. The yarn in the major league is a higher quality yarn. And also there's a color difference. You see three colors in the minor league that I've gone through so far. You see two at 3 different weights in the major league. But I wanted to see if the yarn was knittable, so that I could actually, there are pieces I've been working on where the intent is to auction them off to raise money for the Hall of Fame, because it is a museum. It's a 501c3. And so, it's not like MLB pays for it. So it does need to raise money like any other museum. And so I discovered, the yarn inside Major League Baseball is knittable. However, it turns out that you need a lot of baseballs if you want to make anything. Like if you want to make a men's sweater, you need like 20 baseballs. So I started getting baseballs and just, had to get really good at taking them apart, so that like I wouldn't slice through the yarn, because I needed everything to be continuous. Or I would save all of the red laces, because, you know, those had the potential to essentially be used for some kind of, you know, decoration on whatever's making. And so, you know, this started, maybe 2014 or something, that I was starting to do this. I don't know. But the point is, before the home run surge. And then, you know, 2017 happened, and everybody had different theories on what was, you know, leading to the home run surge, because this is, again, before the home run committee report came out. And so some people thought it was the, you know, the players, and that the players were getting stronger. Some people thought it had to do with hitting techniques or launch angle, things like that. Some people thought it was the ball, and either, you know, maybe it was the exit velocity coming off the bat, maybe it was actually the way the ball traveled through the air. Some people, like, global warming was literally one. It's great, climate change. You know, gee, it's getting warmer, therefore the ball can travel further because the air is warmer. It was legitimately thrown out there. Yeah. And so the home run committee, you know, I guess they released their findings in May of 2018. But backtrack. I got interested because, having taken apart all these baseballs, I thought, well, maybe I can find a difference in terms of construction between essentially balls from before the home run surge versus balls from the 2017 home run surge. And I did have enough to look, and I looked at a ton of different, you know, aspects of the ball, a ton of different variables, you know, like not just like the size and the weight, but also things like the thickness of the leather or the different layers of yarn, and, you know, all the different aspects of that. And I found one thing that was different from before. It turns out, actually, that the change starts happening around the middle of the 2015 season. And so from before 2015 versus in 2017, there was one difference that I could find that was like a statistically significant change, like for real with the math. And it turned out that the red laces were thicker on the newer baseballs by enough. And it's 9%, it turns out. And so a couple of days after I found that, like literally, the home run committee came out with their report, and what they said is, it's the ball. We know it's the ball. Basically, it's got less drag, so it can travel farther. Something about the ball is different. We don't know what's different. And I mean, well, like 2-3 days before, I'd found something on the ball that was different. So, you know, was able to get that article out pretty quickly, and, you know, fortunately. And it kind of went from there, where I was able to then figure out, okay, thicker laces would essentially keep the ball rounder, because they essentially, the way it works is the ball will want to expand at the seams, particularly the way that they used to dry them. So they'd be air dried, and thinner laces would end up expanding more along the seams. You actually get kind of a deformation from being totally round. Thicker laces are just stronger, and they're not going to expand as much. And that had to do, it's specifically that those balls were air dried, and cotton will, if you stretch it when it's wet and let it dry, it stays stretched. So therefore, you know, if you already stretched it and it's dried that way, you end up with a ball that's less round. Hence, the old balls being less round didn't travel as far as the 2017 balls, which stayed rounder. So there was that. But then the ball changed for 2019, and that then became gee, can I do that again? And looked at the laces too, but it turned out that the laces themselves were not actually contributing at all. In that case, it was literally that the seams were lower on the balls were rounder. There were other changes, which is like the leather happened to be smoother, which didn't end up affecting the drag. And yeah, the drag was substantially lower again. And then, you know, the laces had changed, although that seems to be more related to the thicker laces for 2017 were they happened to correspond with a spike in pitcher blisters that happened in the period where those balls were being used. And so 2019, the laces on the balls got thinner again, and pitcher blister problems went away. So, you know, kudos to MLB for doing that, but it didn't end up affecting the way the ball stayed round, because it looks like they also changed the way that they dry the baseballs. So before they'd air dried them, which allowed the cotton to stretch and stay stretched, if you dry them the way that it looks like they've done them starting in 2019, it was like they did it under a blow dryer. And this is the equivalent of like taking your t-shirt that's, instead of drying it out on the line, you throw it in the dryer and then it comes back and it's like shrunk back to its original shape. So by drying a ball under hot air, what you end up with is that those laces that would normally have stretched never get a chance to stretch. And so not only does the ball stay rounder, but the seams that would probably have expanded out don't end up doing it. And so you end up with a ball that's rounder with lower seams that then travels farther. So, and that was kind of the big deal last season, because the ball was, very, very different than any one that's ever been made previously. So it was like this total change. You can't really compare 29 numbers to previous years.
Right. That's awesome.
Okay, so shifting gears just a little bit.
Yeah. Feel free to jump in, by the way. I feel like I'm monologuing. I'd rather not.
It's fascinating because we definitely will jump in.
Listening.
Yeah.
So that obviously we're three girls with a sports podcast, and we're always interested on like seeing more women in sports. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of wondering how it was for you, because you're not only, doing all this work in sports, which is a male-dominated profession, but also in science, which is another male-dominated profession. So I was kind of wondering, like, how your journey was. Like, I mean, was it easy because you're kind of the only girl, or was it what we all probably know, really hard because you're one of the only females doing what you're doing?
You know what? In some ways, it sounds weird, but you sort of go on your own personal experience, and I don't know if it's my personality or what, but I don't know, outgoing enough or assertive enough where, you of course you run into problems, but I also, let's put it this way, one great story, which is usually I would include in my intro, is my dad, let's see, huge baseball fan. He played varsity baseball in college. He probably would have done like the summer collegiate leagues, around that time. But I was born on opening day, and it also happened to be the day that Hank Aaron tied Babe Ruth's home run record.
Oh my God!
It was 4 days later he broke it, but it was opening day. Hank Aaron tied Babe Ruth's home run record. He was playing for Atlanta at the time, but he had done his entire career before then with Milwaukee, and my dad was a Milwaukee Braves fan for basically the entire existence of the Milwaukee Braves.
That's awesome.
And so, here's his daughter, who's literally born on opening day, and it's Hank Aaron doing this great thing. And he's not a particularly religious or superstitious person, but I swear he took it as a sign, and he bought me a baseball bat the day I was born, and he was convinced that I was somehow supposed to like be something in the game. Like I was supposed to be a Hall of Famer. I'd heard that, like, and I'm a terrible ball player, so it's a heck of a bar to meet.
But you are in the Hall of Fame, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, so like, I've got like an Ivy League degree, and I've got a PhD and all this stuff, and he was way more excited about the fact that I got into the Hall of Fame, and that was the thing that got like all the celebration. And particularly with all the stuff, with the ball, and that seems to be having, a real impact within the game. In some ways, I guess because my dad was that person, like I don't remember how old I was when I learned to keep score. And I have been an official scorer professionally, in fact. So like, and it just, yes, I'm very often the first woman doing whatever, particularly in sports, like the job that I do the baseball construction stuff, because it's interesting but it's all me. It's not like I'm doing it as part of a job. It's literally, me doing these experiments in my apartment and things like that. My real job is actually, it's comparable to what they do for StatCast. except it's looking at minor league data for ball and player tracking. And, I'm the only woman in my group. I'm also, the techie scientist. And, I'm more knowledgeable about baseball than a lot of the guys. And it never dawned on me that was strange. So I think I've gotten lucky in a lot of ways. I have certainly in dealing with professional baseball and people in professional baseball. I've never had an instance where somebody has questioned my chops, basically, because I'm a woman. And some of my earliest mentors were things like older or retired scouts, where you would think that would be a big deal. And it just, I really haven't run into that. It almost, I'm sure other people do, but I don't know if it's because I'm coming in a very different way. It's almost a little weird because people get impressed with the PhD and they get kind of deferential because they're like, it does get a little frustrating to be like, oh yeah, you're way smarter than we are. It's like, well, no, not necessarily. I know a lot of really stupid PhDs. You shouldn't just judge me that way. So, and frankly, I don't know a lot of really dumb ball players. Most guys who play this game well are very, very smart. So, don't just because somebody say hasn't gone to college doesn't mean that like they aren't really good, not just at what they do, but it's like, you should go back and get a master's degree in whatever you're interested in because you missed out, so it's I don't know, because again of the way I came in, it was hard, but I don't know if it was hard necessarily because I was a woman or hard because I was coming in from an entirely different career. So I don't really have that context, as opposed to say coming up as an intern through a team or starting out as a journalist or things like that. That the only thing I can think of is there are people I've run into who most people find it really cool that there's kind of the fiber arts crossover as far as the knitting, and that's turned out to be crucial to solving these problems. But I have run into people occasionally who aren't quite willing to take it seriously as science because it's related to something that they don't see as, I don't know, maybe it's like a householdy thing that they associate with their grandmothers or something like that. Yeah. And of course, that being said, I think there are some people where just because it's, literally, I'm sitting here unstitching a baseball using a T-pin. This will actually produce meaningful data. This is how I've done it. One of my favorite tools is a chopstick with some ruler tape along it. And that was what solved the initial home run search problem, the 2017. Or explained it, I should say. I think that kind of non-technical approach, and that it's very applied and it's very hands-on. I think some people aren't as comfortable with that as being, quote, scientific, but it actually is. It's science. It's just not computers or wind tunnels or, equations or whatever. So, or at least not complicated equations. But yeah. So, I guess to get back to the initial question, I haven't found much that has been gender related, but it's either because of the way I've come in or because I don't know if it's that I don't notice or I don't let that stuff bother me. I haven't run into anything in the way of sexual harassment, although that's probably just because, I don't know, maybe I scare guys or something. Who knows? I have no idea. I'm totally speculating there. So, but.
Okay, so we are a Brave-centric podcast. So
in other words, the Hank Aaron story made you really happy.
Yes.
Perfect. My dad's gonna his favorite ball player of all time as a ball player was actually Joe Torre, which is I think why he forgave my brother and I for being Yankees fans. We grew up in New York. We grew up Yankees fans, and he hated that we were Yankees fans until he was kind of willing to admit it was okay around when, the core four type thing came in. And I didn't dawn on me till much later that it was probably because Joe Torre was the manager, and therefore he was willing to forgive me and my brother for, it's not that it was the Yankees, it was Joe Torre's team. So that made it not so bad. Because, of course, they were the evil empire when he was growing up.
Yeah.
So, nobody could be a Yankees fan. Or at least no good person could be a Yankees fan.
So, objectively, who do you, assuming there is a season, who do you think wins this year?
Who do I think what?
Who do you think wins the World Series this year?
I think it's Pickup Sticks. It wins the World Series. Oh, man. Believe it or not, I think some of it is going to depend on if we see another postseason switch out like we did with this season's ball. We probably won't, because we're coming in so late that we don't have we aren't going to have the supply thing. Like MLB won't have built it in the way that they did last year. But so we can go for home run heavy team, because the balls, as far as I can tell, are going to be comparable to last year as far as home runs. I think the reason that I think there's a reason that you ended up with the two teams that had the strongest pitching rotations in the World Series, for example. And I'm still trying to figure out with the Twins, because I feel like they should have gone farther. I would actually say between the ball being roughly the same and, say, Cole coming in, the Yankees might actually do it.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel better, I actually haven't been a Yankees fan for a long time. Really, I mean, I'm enjoying them coming back now that there's more homegrown talent. But they were fun. I liked them a lot when it was homegrown talent, and when everybody wasn't just, it's less than it used to be of every guy getting to bat, not just being like from another team, but literally being the star player from insert team here. So it wasn't so much like you were watching the Yankees. It was like you were watching half of an all-star game, Seriously. And so now at least, they've got Judge, and they've got Gregorius, and they've got, I was going to say Sanchez, catcher. There's the homegrown people are definitely coming in, and it's making it, more fun. But yeah, I can see them probably winning. I'm trying to think on the National League side. Is anyone going to benefit? It's Yankees Dodgers. It's going to be boring. Oh my God, is it going to be boring?
That would be boring.
Yeah. There's a real chance it could be that. Although, actually, hang on. Are they even doing National American League? What's the playoff format? I'm seriously. What is the? I just know it's like. Is it still 10 games? Is it because they're doing 3 divisions, but they're only doing 3 divisions. And so presumably the playoffs are within that. And I still haven't really heard what the playoff structure would be, which may be irrelevant because I don't think the season is going to get to the end anyway.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, sorry to cut in, but I saw some of your tweets about that it's definitely not guaranteed to go, all 60 games, much less go to the postseason. That there's still a lot up in the air with how's everything going to work once we really get the ball rolling.
Well, did you see? There was a post yesterday. I mean, he didn't put it out, but somebody else did. Pictures and I guess stuff pulled from Instagram of Austin Hedges, who's a catcher for the Padres.
Yeah,
and also by the way,
mask on.
His team's rep to the Players Association, which is what I found particularly disturbing because that means he was in enough on everything that was going on. Where things like the safety and health protocols, he damn well better know that better than anybody else on his team. And yet here's this picture of him. From recent, I mean, it doesn't look like someone brought it out from a couple years ago because it doesn't look like he's got his haircut in a long time.
Right.
And, just some of the references are to like it being June or whatever. He's not in great shape in it even. which is also a little disturbing if you're staying in shape to come back. Sorry, maybe that's really great shape for Hedges. I shouldn't knock him.
No, we follow a few Padres fans, and they were all highly concerned about it too.
Okay, all right. Good. I feel bad. His stomach's still flatter than mine, so that's fine. But yeah, and just if he's the guy with the Padres who should be more familiar with health and safety protocols than anyone, and he's out there like in the last week, sometime in the last week or two, just having a party with 20 friends like there's no pandemic. It's gonna. I mean, we've already heard of the outbreaks happening. The way that MLB is. There's a lot of information out there, and because of the way that some of it's being picked up, some of it's being ignored, nobody really wants to listen to the scientists or frankly do the research to pull a lot of it together. But like there was an epidemiologist on Effectively Wild last week, and what they said was that the issue isn't, once the guys are there, social distancing is actually not what's going to make a big deal. What's going to matter is that nobody brings COVID in to begin with, because once it's in, there's no way you will be able, for instance, to have a batter come up and stay socially distanced from the catcher and the umpire. Right. Can't be done. You can't have a guy on first base and hold him on first and still socially distance. I don't know how they're planning on mound visits. That's not in the rules, so presumably, the guys holding their gloves up to their faces to begin with would actually help. It becomes like a de facto mask, and then no one can read their lips. But, there's the point is that transmitting it will be easy if it's in there. And it's the rules that they've focused on feel like a lot of eyewash. It's not, or even the idea that like everything has to be, there are rules in there. I think about like how if the balls are handled too much or whatever, they have to be removed very quickly, and that they have to, actually like clean them off, like with some kind of a cleaner, if they're sort of used more than once. The virus is not going to survive on the surface of a baseball. Yeah. It just can't. Sorry. I mean, it's like you basically have, even if a guy is literally throwing a spitball, I doubt it would be that contagious. It's just not going to happen. Nobody throws a spitball anymore. So, meanwhile, the testing that they're doing is only going to be every other day, and they're not isolating people between tests to see if they come back positive. So what you've got as an example, and of course, it's easy to be asymptomatic. It's easy to be contagious, but still have a negative test come up. False negatives come up all the time, because the whole point of a test like that is you need to have enough of the virus in your system for it to show up on the test. But it turns out that enough to show up on the test is actually more than enough to be contagious. Oh. So when you're first contagious, you may very well still come up as negative. So example, let's say a guy has his first test on Monday, and he happens to test negative, but he doesn't know that yet. He then goes out and he's contagious as of, say, Monday night or Tuesday morning. So he's actually he's in a position to actually infect people from at least Tuesday, and they just have him come in and play a game like it's nothing. Well, by the time they get the test back, on Tuesday or maybe Wednesday, it'll say he's negative. This is not a big deal, even though we've known now since Tuesday morning he has been positive. He gets another test Wednesday, and we know now, of course, that would be positive. He keeps playing Wednesday, Thursday. Test comes back Friday saying he's positive. That means he's been playing at least 3 days, probably 4, with guys while he's positive before a positive test comes back. how many players, how many other teams has he interacted with in that time? Because don't forget, we're only doing like, what, 2-game travel series? I don't even know if we're doing like travel days in between. We don't have enough. It's like 60 games in 66 days. That's crazy.
Right.
So, everyone's immune systems are already going to be on the fritz because of just of the travel schedules. Or even just a lot of the attitudes you get, particularly from the younger guys, the Austin Hedges, I guess, are that they'll be okay because they're athletes and they're young and strong and all of that. But first of all, doesn't mean you're not a carrier. Doesn't mean you can't make other people sick. So it's not all about you. Sorry. But the other thing is that they just had something come out on Rudy Gobert with the Jazz, where he was basically patient zero with sports,
right,
for being positive for COVID, and he did get sick. I earlier today was trying to track down exactly what his symptoms were. They said mildly ill. There are no details beyond that, except that he did lose the sense of taste and smell, which still have not come back. I can by no attest to the fact that this losing your sense of smell is real. It's very strange. So. It's not, and it's not fun.
Yeah, and I saw a couple of articles over the past few weeks as well of like the guys who are young and strong, whatever. Yeah, but we don't know like the long-term effects. So young and strong now, like maybe you don't seem to get so sick, but it is kind of nerve-wracking and scary of like we don't know what this virus will do to your body in the long term.
Well, I mean, the thing is that we do know for non-athletes and for people who've gotten sicker, that, for instance, if you get pneumonia with this, if you have respiratory damage, the kind of damage that gets caused, and you can track down pictures of this online, it doesn't, it stays. You will lose some level of respiratory function. You also can get, side effects, for instance, with heart problems and things like that. And, discussions that I've had with friends are, someone like, the four of us, if you lose 5%, if you lose 10% of your respiratory function, it sucks, but it's not, it's not the end of the world. If you lose that much as an athlete, then your career might just be gone. Like it may not take that much. And, Gobert is not, he says he's feeling better, but he hasn't started playing again yet. And that's really what's going to do it, is when he starts playing, is he going to be in a position where he feels like he's going to be playing as well as he used to. And that's unfortunately something we won't know until we sort of have these, guinea pigs, to see what happens. And, and also, unfortunately, guys, we may get some guys who get really sick. And I'm not really sure, just a question of how important is the gamble?
Because, I know there are people think younger people don't get as sick, but people have died young with it. So you just don't know.
Well, and there's certainly more. It's not even just a testing related thing, but in terms of the number, when the positive numbers going up, they are going up, I think, more with the 20 to 30 demographic than any other at this point, or at least more than it used to, like as far as the change from what it was before. Right. So I think it is starting to become noticeable with the younger demographic. Again, I don't know if that's just asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic, but it's not like you can't get it. I think there was even a CDC, this one's great, a CDC number that came out recently where they had estimates that the reported case numbers, and I think this is just because of asymptomatic cases, because of testing not being as widespread as it could be, that something like, it was like for every person who tests positive right now for COVID, there are 10 people who are positive who have not been tested. So basically a factor of 11 different between what's being reported and what's probably true. And that's the difference between, I was going to say it's a difference between like 1 in 140 people versus like 1 in 12 to 13.
Wow.
Yeah. And even 1 in 140 is not really good.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, it's scary. And guys I've talked to who have their heads on straight, who are actually going to be on the field, are not happy with the situation because it's going to take one guy. You literally have one guy who goes out and hits the bars or whatever, but of course it's going to be a group, and they could take down an entire season. So, it's like if the players were taking it seriously, it would help a lot. It's in fact one of the things as far as there'll be comparisons with, for instance, Korea and how it's worked great in Korea. And then when you start to look at how it's done in Korea, like, no, the culture, Asian culture actually lends itself to being able to keep this under control. Plus, they actually did a good job at the beginning of trying to get it under control. They were detecting, and we were basically they started having outbreaks or positive tests at the same time we did, only they actually acted really fast and we waited around and pretended it wasn't happening. And so that one is a major difference, but also they do things like they take the whole mask safety around other people, like all of the precautions that people should be doing, everybody just does there. And that's just how it works. And here you get people who, for whatever reason, decide that they don't want to be wearing masks, or that they seem to think that because stuff has opened up, that means somehow the pandemic is over, and therefore it's okay to go out and like have a pool party, or go out to a restaurant or whatever. And it doesn't work like that. It's not like the virus just sort of like picked up and left because we stopped paying attention to it. So. Actually, one I'm particularly, there was, in fact, Braves, there you go. I think it was an Athletic article from earlier today or yesterday that mentioned Ron Washington. Tell me you guys read this?
Geez, no.
Oh my God. It's Braves article. Ron Washington. And essentially his discussion of, that he's really concerned about that he's going to be out there coaching third base because he is massively high risk.
Yeah.
Not only is he older, but he's been a heavy smoker. So yeah, he's like at the top of the list for high risk. And I can't believe they're even letting him go out there. The Twins are not letting a couple of their older coaches, or at least a couple of their older coaches will not be participating during the season because they're high risk. But so far the Twins are the only team that's come out and said that, to my knowledge. What I find interesting is that certainly not in the official guidelines. And if anything, the way that they've limited numbers of individuals, it's like they've got something like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 for different kinds of roles. And they're limited numbers within those. So I think coaches and managers fit under tier 1, but there's a maximum number of those people that you can have. And there don't seem to be, we've got a taxi squad for the players. If the players get sick, we don't have a taxi squad for the coaches and managers. And it's not like if you're, and when those guys get exposed, they're all going to get exposed at the same time, right? Even if they're not sick, they're all going to get exposed and hence have to quarantine. So what happens when you lose your manager and all your coaches?
Yeah.
One day. Okay. What do you do the next day? It's like having the manager and the entire coaching staff thrown out of the game and then suspended for a certain amount of time here. And by the way, minor league baseball isn't even running right now. So,
yeah.
I'm sure they could track somebody down, but I really hope they have some of these guys on speed dial. Because there's not even anything that I've seen as far as what if you need to replace one of those guys? it's not in there. I don't think the managers go on the COVID IL. I genuinely don't know how it works. And I don't think baseball does either. I mean, a lot of this seems like they're going to be making it up as they go along. We've already had the Rangers with their front office people, and no one's taking that into account in a meaningful way. Yeah. As far as who gets tested and who doesn't, and a lot of those people aren't even considered within the guidelines, but they're probably actually kind of important to getting the team running or keeping the team running. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of holes, and we're going to plug them as the season goes, and they may actually truncate the season. It might not be that the players get sick. It might be that you lose coaching staffs. It might be that you lose enough important front office people that stuff can't get done. That might be what happens.
I'm butting in here a little late. I somehow muted myself and couldn't undo it. I saw the article with Ron, and he just said something like he's going to wear gloves every day and all this. But what I thought was interesting from being a Braves fan perspective is he said, I can only give something like half love or something this season. I can't give the players real love. Mm-hmm. He has such a good bond with a lot of our, especially like Ozzy Albies and stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can tell the love they share, and he was like, I have to keep this going. Mm-hmm. And that made me sad just on a personal level, because it's fun to watch them interact, and we're not going to have that this year.
Yeah, it's one of the problems, and I mean, this is something very real that has been kind of discussed, but not much, is that, in order for a team to play well together, they have to actually bond. They have to be a team. And between all of the social distancing and stuff, it's just like they're basically not expected to be able to spend any time together. It's going to be hard for them to talk even. Because they're supposed to be like sitting far apart from each other on buses and planes or whatever. And, I'm not sure how the teams themselves, it's almost like, we're going to watch baseball, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be much fun for anybody, including the players.
Yeah, it's almost like much of a toll they're going to take on their mental health too.
Oh yeah, no, I'm that. In fact, that may be the biggest stumbling block. Is the World Series thing that I said before. That was just based on sort of on like realistic numbers as far as offense and pitching and things like that. But it might be much more of a mental game, and which teams can essentially hold themselves together as teams enough that they kind of are able to keep it up. And that's again, and this is assuming that we go more than a few games in. I'll be happy if we make it to opening day at all. At this point, I'm not even confident we'll make it to reporting for spring training or summer camp or whatever they're calling it. Because I mean, you saw that the rosters came out today.
Yes.
I don't know if all of them are out by now. Only maybe half of them were actually submitted, and a number of teams are coming in with very low numbers below the 60, which makes sense because this all happened very, very fast. And even if you read like the guidelines themselves, they aren't designed for stuff to turn over in a week. There are just some things in there that literally can't be done in a week. And so, a lot of the potential 60-man guys haven't been tested yet. If they start out positive, do you really want them on the 60-man and immediately on the COVID IL during spring training?
Right.
Is that really the team you want to try to field, or do you want because they could be sick for a really long time. They could get really sick.
Yeah, we just had a guy discharged from the hospital I work at. Now, granted, he was older and probably had underlying health conditions, but he was, the end of March, he was hospitalized and multiple trips to the ICU, and he just discharged 2 days ago. Yeah. So, even if you do get healthy again and leave, it could be 3 months. Who knows?
Right.
And then the season will be over. So
yeah, well, and we have I guess comparable to that, a close family friend who, and again, older, but ended up he lived like right next to New Rochelle, which was like that sort of patient zero area in New York. Right. Yeah. Outbreak. And so that was very early on, and he got very sick. He spent 10 days in the ICU. They didn't think he was going to make it, and he recovered. And about 3 days ago, complications. He's back in the ICU on a ventilator.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, gracious.
So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. But,
Well,
yeah, he went to all the ball games with us when I was a kid too. So that one's really tough.
Our thoughts are definitely with him.
Yeah.
So I have one last question. It's a complete 180, and then we'll close it out. But so, do you think more home runs is better for the sport, worse for the sport, or just kind of neutral?
Yeah. How would I put it? This is sort of a bastardizing a Bull Durham quote, which is, home runs are boring. Besides that, they're fascist. Throw more ground balls. It's more democratic. The original quote is strikeouts, but it's the same thing because it comes down to 3 true outcomes, which is walks, strikeouts, and home runs.
Right.
And that I'm not a fan. It's funny because, of course, here I am, and everything I've been doing lately is because there have been home runs. But I don't actually think it's good for the game in the long run because I think it's much cooler if there's one home run in a game, maybe a couple, because then you get excited about them. Now it's just it's your team isn't playing well if they didn't hit any home runs during a game. Right. And I remember checking at one point, and there were remarkably few games last season where no home runs were hit. And so it's not. If you're like a date, if you watch baseball every day, it's less exciting. I mean, the other thing is that it takes the defense out entirely. It's just the pitcher and the hitter, and nobody else needs to show up. And my favorite stuff is defense. I love guys who are really athletic and or who can, I love watching Nolan Arenado at third base. I mean, the man is a magician, and it's fabulous to watch. And obviously, that requires ground balls and line drives. Those kind of things. So yeah, home runs are cool if they're not all the time. And it's the thing is, I don't know if we're going to go back, so I don't know if we have a choice. It's going to take a couple of years probably because the kind of things that seem to be leading to having more home runs are not things that can be changed in manufacturing on a dime. Even if MLB wanted to change it, which they may not. Yeah. We don't get a say in that. In fact, the players don't even get a say in that. So, that's the one thing that can be done. It's entirely, well, now that MLB owns Rawlings, it's entirely MLB. Or I should say MLB owns the baseball construction part of Rawlings. They don't worry about the other stuff. But yeah, it's, I guess, yeah. Back to the Braves, Hank Aaron quote that the most exciting play in baseball is a triple.
Yeah.
That's from the Home Run King. So, yeah.
Yep. Well, we appreciate it very much, and I think we all learned a lot, and our listeners will as well. You somehow made science fascinating for me, so that's a plus.
Science should always be fascinating. If someone is making science not fascinating, they're doing it wrong.
Well, good. See, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yes, so we appreciate it, and if any of our listeners want to follow you on social media or any of your articles or anything, where should they look for you?
Well, I have, I think it's maybe 6 articles on The Athletic. So just, the most recent is just from the beginning of April. And that one explains, we didn't even talk about the postseason ball, did we? That one explains how the ball died in the postseason. And it's very interesting because MLB is not admitting what my data show, which is that they used a lot of 2018 balls in the postseason. They subbed in instead of 2019. So yeah, that's from the beginning of April. But yeah, so there's articles in The Athletic, and that's where all the research is. And then if they want to follow me on social media, I'm basically just on Twitter. And it's Baseball Astrophysics, which is BBL_ and then astrophysics without the I. It turns out that the handles were shorter when I actually originally got it. So there's character limits.
Cool.
I'll
Well,
definitely tag you when this comes out. It
Oh,
should
please do. Yes.
this week, probably Tuesday or Wednesday.
Right. Well, we'll see how things are going on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
Players are supposed to be reporting around then.
Yeah, we'll see. Another 3 days what actually happened.
Yep. Fingers crossed.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been really, really awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me.
you're welcome.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.